Hello, and welcome back to the product stage for day 3 of RNS. I can't believe it's already day 3. I'm very sad, but it has been an incredible week. So many great sessions. I have some highlighted that I'm definitely going to go back and watch. I hope you all have enjoyed this time so far this week. And thanks for joining us here on the product stage. If this is your very first time coming here, my name is Kayla Schneider, and I have the pleasure of leading our solutioning and our enablement teams here at Virtuous. And I am joined today by my lovely colleague, Ben Harney. Ben, do you want to give a quick intro?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great to see everybody. Perhaps a little bittersweet as the last day of our week together. Some familiar faces in the chat over here, too. For those who don't know me, I'm Ben. I'm one of the solutions engineers on Kayla's team. I get to spend my days talking to awesome organizations like yourselves about responsive fundraising, about making Virtuous help us reach those objectives, reach those goals, moving the needle on generosity and fundraising. And yeah, we're going to take a look at some of those cool things that we can add to the toolbox with that today.
Yeah. Um, you probably don't need this, but I am going to do a quick little overview of responsive. Gabe kind of talked about it earlier, but just want to make sure as we think about like we're really going to go into this product demo, like go in deep. What does that actually mean? And how is our product built? Like our product was built with this pedagogy of responsive fundraising in mind. Everything and how we build all comes back to these 4 key tenets of how we engage with our supporters. And so I do want to do a like quick little refresher on that so that we can understand like kind of like the framework of what we're talking about. And then Ben is going to drive us through and tell us, and we're going to get in and see the beautiful product that we have here at Virtuous. So let me share my screen really quick. And we are going to do a quick overview of responsive. So share that. Let me make sure I pull that one up. There we go. Okay. Y'all can see responsive here. Perfect. So when we think about our responsive framework, just a reminder, right? It is all based on these 4 key tenets of how we want to engage with our supporters. So we first want to listen. We want to listen to who they are, what makes them tick, what do they love, how do they want to be engaged with, what do they know about our mission, and where are they at in that relationship with us, right? We want to know who they are first, so that we can connect with them personally at scale. We want to make sure that we are talking to them the way that they want to be talked to, right? We want to talk to them in avenues that they want to be talked to, right? If you're sending me an email, you're talking to me in the wrong avenue. I have hundreds of thousands of unread emails that I will never get to, right? If you're sending me one of those, you're lost. But send me a text message and I'm going to be able to respond, right? So making sure that we talk to people the way that they want to be talked to, with the right, asks in the same way of like, hey, I really care about X, Y, and Z, or those are the things that make my heart, bubble and get excited. So knowing those specific things, we listen to that so that we can connect personally. And then at scale is really important. So that's where we're going to talk about automation. And Ben is going to talk about that a lot today. Then we want to suggest the right ask at the right time, knowing that, each person is on a different journey. What ask makes the most sense? Is it a financial ask? What type of financial ask? A single gift, a recurring gift, a planned gift, a major gift, right? What are the types of ways that we should be asking for those financial gifts? But also knowing that generosity is holistic, knowing that our supporters don't just give out of their checkbooks, but they can give to us of their time and their advocacy, making sure that we really think about how do we deepen that relationship beyond a financial ask. And then the last thing we want to do is we're going to learn what worked for our supporters, what worked for us, always making sure that we can be more efficient, effective, and that we are communicating appropriately. We take all that information and then we start that process again. We listen again, understanding now that we know more information, we listen to how they are so we can connect more personally, suggest, and that cycle goes on and on. And so when we think about this in that framework of how do we engage, what does that look like? This really is that idea of having responsive and dynamic campaigns, connecting with our supporters at their timing and their intent, making sure that we are asking of them and connecting with them where they are at. Everybody is on a different journey. Everybody comes to us in different ways, has different needs, has different expectations and wants of how they want to engage with us. And so making sure that we support that as well. That's really the idea of the framework of how Virtuous was built and why we exist. And so now that we kind of have that kind of base framework of what that looks like, Ben is going to kind of jump into the product and show you that in real life. And so again, if you have questions, put them in the chat. I will be answering them, going back and forth there. And then if there is anything that's like, hey, I think that'd be a really good conversation, I'll have Ben kind of walk through that there as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Ben. Hop on in and let's see Virtuous.
Absolutely. Let's get my screen shared for all of y'all. And there we go. Give me a moment while I move you over to my other screen so I can still see those lovely comments you're adding. And let's start diving in. So I kind of want us to be thinking about, especially with that responsive fundraising framework that Kayla was pitching to us just now, I want us to think about the flow of that data, right? Because when we're meant to be responsive, that's not just a matter of being responsive with our donors, but it's also a matter of being responsive with our data and really internally and across our teams as well. So with that flow of our data, we're going to start on really the landing pad for all of it, right? Of course, in this case, a contact record where we're going to see a lot of this information, how it enters the system, how it's going to be organized for us to use and to reference, and then how we're going to build on that to learn, to suggest, to connect with our folks. So starting off, it is actually really important when we're perusing and exploring our contact record to really be thinking about our data structure. And it's important in this case because it might be a little bit more unique compared to some of the other styles of data structure that you're used to seeing in, say, like a legacy platform. And that's in that Virtuous uses a natural state of householding, right? Or you might hear it called like a true state of householding. And really what that means is that the contact record, so whether that's a household or an organization, a foundation, maybe a custom contact type, as well as the individuals in that household, all of those are going to function as their own object. They're all going to have their own unique ID number. And what that lets us do is track and engage with these records either at that overarching contact level or more specifically with those individuals. So one of the biggest places this comes into practice, and what really is going to be perhaps, again, a little bit more unique compared to other places you may have seen it, is how giving gets tracked, right? So in Virtuous, all giving is rolling up, it's being consolidated at that contact level. So for my Ackerman household, I can still see, hey, did Ken sign that check? Did Michaela give us that envelope of cash? But it's being consolidated in one space, so I have a single source of truth. I'm not worried about my business rules. Hey, how should I soft credit individuals in these particular instances? Hey, do I need to actually pull up multiple records, multiple giving histories to puzzle together that big picture of one family's giving to us, right? We have that single source of truth here, but like we said, also the flexibility to manage those individuals differently. So for example, looking at my household, I've got some fields here for information that is applicable to the entire household. Hey, their language spoken, their prospect status. But let's say that I had an event coming up. Maybe Michaela is going to be the only one joining me at that event. Well, I'm going to have some information specific to her regarding her dietary preferences. And now I can actually report and filter on that to say, hey, is my catering or is the food that I'm going to have at this event meeting the dietary preferences of all of my attendees there? So as we go through our contact record, I also want us to be thinking about, like we said earlier, that cross-team element of communication. If we've got a bunch of folks working with our donors, maybe marketing is working with some sorts of projects. Fundraising is, of course, having their own sets of touch points and communications with them. We don't want to have blind spots. We don't want there to be this question of, okay, has someone else been communicating with my people? What other conversations are being had right now? So we're going to see a couple of tools that will give us that level of visibility. First and foremost, you've probably already drawn your eyes to it here, but that big activity feed. And this is basically our big digital paper trail for everything happening with this record. It's going to be everyone in the record. So whether it's Ken, whether it's Michaela, whether it's their daughter Marissa, doesn't matter. That activity is going to be loaded up here. As you can probably tell, it is pretty granular, pretty specific. And this brings us back to another element of responsive. We want to remove bottlenecks to our team members' access to the information that's important to them, to their top priority, what's relevant to what they're working on. So as granular as this activity feed is, we're going to have an equally granular set of filters here at the top that we can use to zero in on, again, our priorities, right? If I click between a bunch of contacts, it's going to know exactly what I want to see. So I'm already locking into the information I need, and I'm not having to perhaps search a little bit further or spend more of my time trying to pick out those important pieces of information. Now, this activity feed here is going to, like I said, include everything. And so one of those big elements is going to be that it is going to be referencing our communications. Now, you've probably seen in a couple of sessions this week already, but we do have a full marketing engine in Virtuous. That is, broad strokes, generally going to be for mass communications. I'm doing a bulk email send, so an email blast. I'm doing an event invitation. Maybe it is a solicitation, but it's being sent to a bunch of different people. And back to my idea of removing bottlenecks, if you maybe need to just communicate with one person on a one-off touch point, we want to take out that ping-ponging, that dancing between a bunch of different tools, bunch of different pages, just to accomplish what really should be more of a linear process, right? So you're going to have all of those same features from the marketing engine available to you from this just dashboard of the contact. I can directly send personalized text messages to my folks. I can send those personalized emails. Remember, really, really handy about those emails. If I have one personalized for Kayla, moment I click on that compose email button, that's going to kick me over to my email client. And that whole conversation, both the initial email and the rest of those replies, are going to be linked back to Virtuous with a BCC. It's literally like you're BCCing Virtuous in the conversation. They're all being tracked to the contact record, and they're going to be stored as some notes. We're going to get into that with a little bit more detail in just a moment here. But that's certainly not the end-all be-all of the engagement tools that we'll have on our contact record. Remember, we've got things like web history. So if you've heard up to this point at all about our responsive listener, it's a little piece of code. It gets embedded in your website, and it's tracking, hey, who's visiting us, right? Does this visitor match someone that we already have in the database? And if it does, we can see their activity on our website. So I could say, hey, for Ken and Michaela, when? Literally, what date did they visit us? How many pages did they view? How much time did they spend there? If they filled out forms or took any actions, what were those actions? And I can even pull up those session details to see very specifically exactly what they were engaging with. So maybe Michaela's visiting our site. She's actually looking up about some particular projects that we're running right now. She's looking at the details of maybe an upcoming volunteer opportunity. The next time I have a conversation with Michaela, I can use all of that information to better build those conversations, better build my relationships with my people. Somewhat similarly, we'll also see our social insights. This is going to be something that you're probably already doing currently as part of your prospect research. Maybe you spend a little bit of time saying, you know what are they up to on Facebook? What does their LinkedIn look like? Are they getting a lot of engagement there? Maybe how many followers on Twitter do they have? Well, let's remove that bottleneck as well. Let's take that time that you're spending on that research and shift that over to the computer. As long as you have an email for that contact, you can screen the internet for that publicly available data. This is where I like to emphasize publicly available data. This is not looking at their private Instagram accounts just for their friends or anything like that. It's exactly what you would find spending that time doing a pretty thorough Google search yourself. As you saw here, it's pretty much instantaneous though. So for someone like Ken, I'm seeing, hey, some broad personal information. Does he have any websites, any organizations he's associated with? It will pull up those social profiles. So I could click into here. Again, hey, is Ken working with like 50,000 followers on Twitter? Excellent. Maybe that's some sort of network I can capitalize on, exactly like Kayla was saying, using those social connections for maybe something like advocacy. Likewise, is he getting that engagement on LinkedIn or any of those other profiles that it would locate for us? Now, one of my favorite things about Social Insights here is that it will also pull those photos. So this is kind of a twofold advantage for us. For one, it is going to add those photos to the contact record when it finds them. So these aren't just going to be kind of these faceless names, these little pockets of data that we have in our database, and then kind of we go, oh, you know what? That's my friend, that's my donor, that's my contact. We're immediately adding that face to the name. We're immediately adding that level of personalization. Now, like I said, kind of twofold. Maybe you're like me. Perhaps I've got a meeting coming up with Ken next week or something, and I'm going, I think I remember what Ken looks like. I'm maybe like 75% sure. Okay, I don't want to be the awkward guy sitting in the corner of the coffee shop, kind of half waving to everybody who I think might be Ken, just trying to catch him when he comes through the door. Let's have that reminder. Okay, that's what Ken looks like. I can greet him directly as soon as I see him. And kind of similar to that coffee shop meeting, if I'm in the area, I'm going to meet Ken at a coffee shop that's around the corner of his house. I can immediately pull up using geolocation what other donors are in that area. Maybe I want to expand this a little bit more, cast a bit of a wider net. Who all is going to be around that I could maybe set up another meeting with, reach out to, say, hey, I'm going to be in town, and just open those doors for us. So, a lot going on there in terms of engagement, right? And rightfully so. We've got a lot of different ways that we want to be thinking about building and stewarding these relationships. But bringing this all the way back to that idea of cross-team visibility. If I'm reaching out to Ken or reaching out to Michaela, I want to have that broader sense of what other conversations have been happening. But also, if I need something from the rest of my team, hey, could you do actually a little bit of prospect research on Michaela for me? Hey, could you reach out to marketing, see if anything that has been sent out has specifically included these folks? This is where tasks are going to come in. Right? When we're thinking about not just notifying the rest of our team about important moments, but also scheduling these out, tasks are going to be our bread and butter. I do want us to extrapolate a little bit when it comes to these tasks, though. These are certainly not only relevant to a contact record. Tasks are kind of the little fairy dust that we see across a bunch of different elements and objects in the Virtuous solar system, right? They're going to be related to a lot of things, whether that's a grant, whether that's a project, but ultimately they're all going to come back to the user in very similar ways. So in this case, I'm on my contact, Ken and Michaela. What active tasks are on the table right now? Perhaps what's overdue. I need to circle back to those, make sure they're not collecting dust. Additionally, what's been completed. If I need to make a new one, I can also create custom task types, have a little bit of segmentation there. I can make them recurring tasks. I can assign them to the proper team member. It doesn't just have to be me. But then we're going to see those populate in a few different places. So here I've switched to the CRM dashboard. This is one of the standard dashboards, not counting, of course, any custom dashboards you might create on your own, but one of the standard dashboards that Virtuous has right out of the box. It effectively functions as your homepage. On this homepage, while it is customizable, you are still going to have this little tasks panel down here. So immediately when you log in, you'll see, hey, what tasks are on my plate? Look at that. I'm a little bit late actually calling Eric. That is overdue. Okay, highlighted red. I need to know, or I know that I need to get back to that. I can see what's coming up fast. Similarly, from here, I can make those tasks, and I'll be able to see a full task manager. So maybe you like more of a table view. That can be your tasks. Again, what's overdue, what's resolved. Your leaders can see more broadly, bird's eye view, what's assigned to the whole team. My favorite part, though, our card style task management interface. So if you use something like a Trello or an Atlassian, this is going to be somewhat familiar. I can see my different stages for these tasks. I even have a full suite of filters that I can use. So we were talking about potentially creating custom task types. Hey, maybe I need to zero in on just my upcoming grant applications or reporting submissions or thank you calls. I set my filters. It's going to zero into just those. As I focus on those ones, I can say, hey, you know what? I know I'm late calling Eric. Let's say I knock that out, drag that right over to completed. It's going to be checked off my checklist. And when I would return to my dashboard, that would be no longer highlighted red as it's now considered completed. Now, again, visibility being our kind of high priority component here, when those tasks are created, whether they're created manually by a user, whether they're assigned to yourself or they're assigned by someone else, if they're created in bulk via query, if they're created automatically through an automation, which we will see quite soon, doesn't matter. Those are going to be notified both in system. You will also get an email notification, though. And then additionally, if you attach a deadline to that task, you'll get another email saying, hey, this deadline's coming up fast. Just wanted to make sure it was still top of mind for you. And And that's going to go out about 24 to 48 hours before the deadline approaches. So you have some time to respond when you need it. So let's circle back to our contact record now. Now that we've seen kind of where this information is coming from, where it's landing, how we're actually making sure that we're maintaining that visibility, let's start thinking about how we're going to start porting this to those other tools in the Virtuous ecosystem, right? When we're thinking about this being an all-in-one engine, right? It's got all of our features. If we look at our flyout here, whether that's online giving, whether that's reporting, emailing, communications, events, doesn't matter. We need to be able to utilize the data that has landed effectively. So we're going to go down and look at some tags here. Okay. Tags are going to be the main way that we think about segmentation, about differentiation in Virtuous. Now, this can be used for just about anything you can imagine. Maybe this is going to be giving tiers. Maybe it's going to be membership of giving societies. Maybe it's going to be philanthropic affinities or donation interests. Maybe it's going to be volunteer skill sets or just volunteer history. Maybe it's folks who attend certain types of events, right? However you need to segment, to bucket out your people, tags are going to be the main way that we think about creating that differentiation. But where we really see the force multiplication, again, reducing bottlenecks, allowing us to be more responsive, is when we start thinking about how tags get paired with automation. So I'm going to use a pretty simple example for us to start with. We'll see this kind of grow and snowball as we get more closer to those automation workflows. But let's just think about something like major donors. We've all probably got at least some semblance of a definition, of a criteria for what constitutes a major donor, right? Let's say in this instance, it's anyone who's given, let's say, a gift over $1,000 or who has reached maybe $2,000 in lifetime giving. Well, okay. Without automation, what it would probably look like to capture that, to make sure that that is always an up-to-date group, is saying, okay, I'm going to run a query or a report or a list, find all the donors who meet those criteria, and then perform something like a global update, a global add, to add some sort of differentiator, some indicator on them to say, okay, this person is now a major donor. And maybe you run that every week, twice a week, whatever that might look like. Okay, we've captured, we've found, we've identified who those major donors are, but it's a lagging indicator. That group is only as recent as the last time you ran that process. And additionally, it's a manual process that you're having to run in some recurring basis. We're eating up our bandwidth, right? We're adding more bottlenecks. So when we compare that with automation, or rather pair it with automation, we're saying, okay, we have our criteria for a major donor. We set that query. It finds those folks in a dynamic way. The automation is going to respond to that when new folks enter our criteria, when new folks meet the threshold for being a major donor. Bam, tag is automatically added when they cross that threshold. It is always up to date. It is not that lagging indicator waiting for us to run the update. And like I said, fairly bare bones example, we can extrapolate that to any sort of group, any sort of segment that you could define those criteria for. So we're going to get more into that quite a lot. I do want to also mention while we're here how wealth data can factor into that too. So we partner with Donor Search to utilize this wealth data, utilize these wealth screenings as native data in Virtuous. And really what that means is that all that wealth information is going to function just like any other standard field that you'd find on a record, standard or custom field that you've created for that matter. But what it lets us do, if I open up all wealth data here, we're going to get some table stakes stuff, right? Things like donor rating, estimated capacity. You will get more of a breakdown into donor wealth here as well. You'll also get that really detailed breakdown in sector giving. So you could even say, hey, let's establish a threshold based on literally this particular individual's historical nonprofit giving. Maybe we're a healthcare organization. And I say, you know what? The moment we find someone captured by a query who has given more than $1,000 to healthcare giving, let's put a major donor prospect tag onto them. Automatically loop them into certain reports, into certain analyses, automatically loop them into certain communications or in one of my MGO's portfolios, right? We're having the system find those important moments and those important people, and then bubble that information up to us in the way that makes most sense, the way that allows us to be most responsive there. All right, well, my friends, that's going to about do it for what I want to look at on the contact record for now. There's going to be a couple of things that we'll kind of boomerang back to in just a little bit. But now that we've seen some of our donor information, I want us to think about how this is getting into the system and then where it's going to go once we kind of roll it over to the automation side of things. As far as the information getting into Virtuous, of course, you can always make records manually. You could plug in a new donor yourself. You could import that. You could have that, entered by yourself. It's probably going to come in through forms a lot of the time as well. Now, I did want to stop by on just our new form editor to show you this is certainly not specifically or exclusively, rather, just going to be online giving. I'm talking about whether it's online giving, whether it's a pledge form, an event registration form, a volunteer registration form, even something like a lead form. If you're not familiar with these, I always call them like the Swiss Army knife form. They're going to be really, really, really flexible to just collect more information about our folks. Maybe we don't need to say, hey, this is for giving a gift. This is not for registering for something. This is a survey, and we're going to collect some custom survey question data. This is going to be about communication preferences, and we're going to collect those. All of that is entering the system. If we are thinking about some online giving, though, we've got some really cool things about how this is going to enter Virtuous as well. The biggest thing that I want us to be thinking about are dynamic gift asks. So remember back on that contact record under web history, we talked about the responsive listener, right? And I said the responsive listener is going to be a little piece of code. It's looking at who is landing on your web page and letting us know what activity they're performing on our web page. Well, that's not all it does. When they land on one of our forms, it's going to say, hey, if they're an existing donor with us, we don't want to just give them kind of this generic, non-personalized set of ask suggestions. That's a good recipe for missing the mark, right? We want to hit that bullseye. We don't want to ask too low, maybe leave money on the table. We don't want to ask too high, maybe risk alienating that donor with a larger ask than they can fit, right? We want to hit the bullseye. So it's going to say, okay, maybe Ben has never donated to our wildlife group here. It's going to start with 10, 25, 50. Maybe Kayla's been donating to our wildlife group here a whole lot. Kayla's been given $200 gifts, $500 gifts, $1,000 gifts over again. That $10 suggestion is certainly not appropriate for Kayla. It would maybe start at 200, go up to 500, go up to 1,000. It's dynamically adjusting to make sure, like I said, we're hitting that bullseye every time we're making an appropriate ask. Now, from there, just like to highlight this as well, maybe I've said, you know what, I'm going to give that $50 one-time gift. I've not opted to make it a recurring gift. Okay, that's okay. I'll continue. It's going to give me a suggestion. Hey, this is the effect of what a recurring gift can add. Could we put you down for $5, for $12, for $25 here? Of course, I'd still have the option to continue if I opted not to make that a recurring gift. The cool thing about these forms, though, beyond all of that stuff, obviously, is that these have a really, really wide array of the different ways they can actually be embedded on your website, right? This is a very different example. With our wildlife group, it was a pretty locked onto the page modal is what we call those. We could also have it as more of a light box, add additional pop-ups, additional branding, additional imagery, have those ask arrays different for what type of gift it is. And then, of course, all that information getting kicked into the system in the exact same way. So once all of that has entered Virtuous, once those go through our data health screens, our duplicate checkers, the information is landed and it is in those records, this is where it's going to start powering, of course, the crown jewel automation workflows. I suspect you all have looked at all of this information by this point in the week, but just as a reminder, the reason why these workflows are going to be so powerful is that they're covering a few different bases for us. It's not just going to be about sending emails on an automatic basis. It's not just going to be about, hey, let's create a task for a user. all these actions will fall into one of two groups, either internal actions, and that's going to constitute really any update to the database. So yeah, it could be creating tasks for our users. It could also be adding or removing those tags we talked about. It could be updating data points and updating fields. It could be moving folks between various different email lists. Flip side, going to be, of course, external actions, and that is all the communication. So yes, that will include automatically sending emails, personalized emails. It will also include automatically sending personalized texts, automatically sending personalized letters. If you've not looked at our letters on demand stuff by this point in the week, that's actually letters or postcards automatically printed, stamped, mailed on your behalf without you ever going to the post office, you ever looking in an envelope, nothing like that. So all of that together, that combined is what we think of as a full donor journey. Now, yes, with all those different moving parts, I always say it like this, the skill ceiling is high. We can get complicated. We can get nuanced with these automations, but you certainly don't have to. For one, we've got a number of best practice templates built into the system as a bit more of a runway to get you off the ground. We'll go through a couple of these in just a second too. But also, many times, even simpler automations can be just as useful. Maybe we have one that just notifies us with a task. Hey, Ben, you haven't reached out to Kayla in over 90 days. Just wanted you to let you know the system's not actually going to send anything on my behalf, just bubbling up and saying, hey, might be due time to reach out to Kayla again. Now, in terms of those best practice templates, I like to start by showing you life-to-date giving milestones. I always joke this is kind of a fan favorite. Everybody likes to use this for good reason. It's kind of awesome. What life-to-date giving milestones is going to do is add an extra special thank you when a donor passes a lifetime giving threshold that you would define. So let's say I give my most recent $200 gift to you. I get my normal transaction confirmation. I get my normal receipt, maybe a quick thank you and acknowledgement day of. But then the next day, I get another email saying, hey, Ben, actually, with your most recent $200 gift, you just passed $1,000 in lifetime giving. Thank you so much for your continued generosity, your continued support. It means the world to us, et cetera, et cetera. And to me, this is really illustrating the three biggest pillars, the three biggest key ingredients that automation is adding to the mixing bowl for us. For one, we've been saying it, that hyper-personalization. That extra email is referencing the donor. It's referencing that donor's name, how much they gave, when they gave, what they gave to, all of those details so that it does feel like that personal outreach and not just like a computer-triggered email. Second, it is minimizing the time it took for us to make that extra special response. This is not 6 months down the road. Hey, we happen to run a report. Would you look at that? Ben passed $1,000 in lifetime giving 6 months ago. Sure, you might still send that extra special touch point, whether it's an email, a phone call, whatever, but we have at that point diluted the impact. It is no longer top of mind for me. I might appreciate the extra email or the reach out, whatever it looks like, but we've lost that direct, immediate contact. And finally, it is not just minimizing, it is eliminating the staff time it took to add that extra level of responsiveness, right? We set the criteria. We set the parameters of the response. We set how that email should be personalized. We set when it goes out. We set the plan. But the computer identifies the moment and the computer executes that plan for us. So this is where we see that snowball start building, right? We're more responsive and we're taking less staff time to do it. So with that, let's take a look at our new donor welcome series. As Kayla knows, I could talk about this all day. I am just a huge advocate of new donor engagement in general. I'm sure y'all have seen and are privy to all the research out there that just shows how impactful it is. I always call it the billboard metric. It's always the one in big, shining, bright lights. But donors who receive that welcome communication, so basically donors who receive some level of engagement within the first 30 days after their first gift, have a 300% greater lifetime value than donors who aren't engaged in that honeymoon period. So we 100% want to be capitalizing on that. Really, a new donor welcome sequence is the best way to do it. Hey, if it's automated, it's also the easiest way to do it. So this is what I've built out for us here. The first thing that you're probably going to notice are these different tracks, these different branches. And this is essentially the branching logic across our automation. Each of them are going to be defined by a set of tags or a query that you can build right into that automation. When someone falls in that group, they are going to get triggered into that branch. So let's start by looking at this leftmost branch here, looking at what happens when someone is a first-time donor. So what happens when they give that first gift? It's going to start with some internal actions. It'll tag them as a first-time donor. And now if I'm ever sending out something specific to first-time donors, or maybe running a report on my first-time donors, I don't have to worry, is my query up to date? Is my grouping up to date? Have I added tags to everyone who needs this particular tag? The automation is taking care of it for us. It's then going to add another tag to say, hey, they are currently in the new donor welcome series. They are currently receiving this welcome sequence. So maybe if I'm sending out another email blast and I'm thinking, you know what, I really don't want to overwhelm the inbox of all of my new donors, of the folks receiving this welcome series, let's remove them. Let's filter out anyone with that tag of new donor welcome series. And that way I know they're still only going to be receiving exactly what I've put in the sequence here. We have it trigger that automatic wealth data screening. So all that wealth data we saw earlier, that's going to get automatically updated. And then I could even use that to further branch out my automation. Maybe I want slightly different sequences depending on the giving tier, depending on the giving capacity that wealth screening finds. And this is where it kicks off with the external communications. I do want to take a second just to emphasize how important the multi-channel nature of this sequence is. So we've actually been working on a couple projects that pertain directly to this. Organizations like Next After have conducted studies that show when your outreach is multi-channel, when donors are receiving emails and texts and letters, when it's across a few different pathways of communication, things happen like you see a 212% increase in lifetime value from that. So let's think about that. 300% from that new donor welcome series, 212% from it being multi-channel. You'll also see a 56% increase in retention rate. So super, super critical to incorporate as many of these different channels as we can. Mine starts with that initial welcome email. It's going to pace out the cadence with a couple of delays in between there. Puts a postcard in the mail using letters on demand. Going to send them a text a few days later. Task someone on the team to give them a personal phone call, and then finish off with one final email before it then removes the tag to say, hey, they have now completed that new donor welcome series. If I was filtering out the folks in this sequence from, again, some other communication, well, that tag's off. Those people who have finished the sequence no longer going to be filtered out or excluded from those. And very similarly, when they give their second gift, it's going to remove the tag to say, hey, they are no longer a first-time donor. We have retained them. We got that second gift. They should no longer be included in first-time donor reports or communications or whatever else that might be ending up used for. Now, I have also added a third branch here just to give you an example of how we might further segment this and define on a little bit more of a specific basis. What if I wanted a slightly different sequence for folks who I define as either first-time major donors or just first-time major donor prospects even? I could say, you know what? This first-time donor track, that's going to be for all first gifts below a certain gift amount, maybe. Any gifts that are the first time and above that gift amount, they're going to have a similar start. They're going to get that first-time donor tag added, but maybe they'll have another tag added for first-time major donor prospect, something along those lines. It'll still have that wealth screening, but then instead of immediately triggering that sequence, it's going to have me follow them. It's going to put them in my portfolio. It's going to start by assigning me to give them a personal phone call. And maybe I ask them, hey, we'd love to talk more. What's your preferred way of communicating? Like Kayla was talking about earlier, right? Do you prefer email? Do you prefer text? What's going to be the best way to make sure that our communication, our relationship going forward is as best as it can possibly be? So that's our broad look at automation. I do just want to emphasize, let your imagination run wild with this. If you've got processes that you're thinking, you know what, this could be a good candidate for automation, in many cases, it's a really good candidate for that. We'll often speak of a crawl, walk, run approach. Like we said, the skill ceiling is high here. We can get nuanced. We can get complicated. Maybe not going to be day one. Maybe not going to be month one. We're starting crawling, maybe just implementing that new donor welcome series, adding more of those processes as automated sequences as we go. When you hit that running pace, when you have a lot of automations running, a lot of your processes being shifted from your team, being eaten up by that staff time, and then put onto the computer, we see an average of about 20% decrease in staff time across the board. So zoom out, think about that in the context of a full week. 20% is an extra day back in your pocket to focus on the human side of that fundraising. So I know we've got about 5 minutes left here. The last thing I wanted to show you is as you are building out these sequences, you will always be able to track your engagement on these sequences as well. So maybe you're thinking, you know what? In my new donor welcome series, my second email doesn't get a lot of clicks, doesn't get a lot of opens. We'll have all those metrics. Hey, let's take it out. Let's keep this focused and to the point. And similarly, if you're working with some different emails, you can have your templates, you can have organization templates. But what I want to show you is as you're building them out, you can also run A/B tests built right in. You simply set, okay, between version A, between version B, quick slider for what randomized subset of those recipients you would like to use is. What's your win condition? Is the efficacy of that email going to be based on open rate or click rate? And how long do you want the test to run? This is literally a timer on the clock. Once that 24 hours, 48 hours, or however long expires, the system goes back and checks, okay, based on your win condition, was version A or was version B better? It does that check. It automatically sends out the winning version to the rest of that recipient group. So when you're automating these, when you're trying to really optimize and narrow down exactly what those sequences should look like, you're going to have all the testing. You're going to have all the metrics to make sure that you've got your finger to that pulse. So like I said, I know we're approaching our end time here. I do want to take a pause. Kayla, did we have any questions that we'd like to circle back to or anything else that we can kind of touch on as we're starting to wrap up here?
You have done such a great job. No questions. No questions. I think it just is helpful to see all of the things that Virtuous can do in one place, right? Ben showed us how so many teams can work together to really accomplish the same goal of one, raising money. That's what we got to do, right? Everybody, we got to raise money to do the work. But two, how do we also just take such good care of our supporters, whether those be donors or volunteers or people who are just interested in your mission, right? So making sure that we can do all that in one place, capture it all in one place, keep it actionable, and really just connect with them at scale. I love it. It's great. No questions. No questions. So that's all we're going to have for now. Thank you so much, Ben. Loved it. If you all are interested in spending some more times on the new products that Jason and Gabe both talked about this morning, Virtuous BI and our newest version of our Raised Donors product, which you saw a little glimpse of here, come and see me in about 15 minutes. I'm going to be going deep into those two products, really just kind of giving a deeper look into what those look like, the features and functionality of those, and really how hopefully they will make your life easier. So come on back here for that last session of our product stage, which is so crazy. It's going to be over before we know it. But there are other great sessions as well. So come on and take in the last session, and then obviously our ending keynote. Really love spending all the time with y'all today. So if I see you in 15 minutes, yay. If not, enjoy those other sessions. Thank you guys so much for your time. And we will see you at another session. Bye,
Thanks,
y'all.
everybody.